Hello, I'm Otto and welcome back to Dyson Sphere Program. So in the last episode, we continued to start setting up some of the components we'll need. We also discussed a little bit about ratios, and then we also started setting up this section here for collecting the materials, the components that we will have on the bus. Before we get into what we're going to do in the next episode, or in this episode, sorry, let's talk about what else I have done. So I did say that I was going to continue to work on some of the components, but did unlock some of those, and I'm probably not going to talk too much about what component or what upgrades I'm going to be doing over here in the upgrade section. I might mention it like every time we get to a new science, just like, hey, these are the key ones, but for the most part I would say just constantly upgrade these. So like, for instance, I'll be upgrading this one shortly and this one after this episode, and then probably some of the weapon ones too, because we're going to need, well, we don't have to have them, but they would be nice for the next episode because we are going to attack the Dark Fog. Same with the energy shield. But as for the technologies that I said we were going to unlock, we did the fluid storage and the water pump, the thermal power, and the oil processing. I also decided, I was like, you know what, I really want to have the battlefield analysis base. So I did add in engines. I also added in the semiconductors, or the microcrystalline components. Yeah, we're just going to call them semiconductors. That's way easier. And then the battlefield analysis station, which is almost unlocked, so we're going to unlock that quick. And I already have the materials needed to craft a few of these, so I am able to craft 6. Something else that I did was I preemptively buried the iron ore over here because we will need that to be out of the way for the battlefield analysis stations. So what is the battlefield analysis station? So this is an item that we're just going to drag like this. I thought about building it into the blueprints, but I'm not too concerned just because it's nice to have. It's just not something that we want to build into the blueprints because it could always get in the way. So what exactly does it do? So I'm just going to set up a couple of them like this. So for starters, it's going to help us build faster. Once we start placing blueprints, it does have its own construction bots, so that is something that's very handy. It has 12 for each of these machines, and we currently only have 4, so this is going to definitely increase the amount of things that we can be placing at a time, as long as they are close enough. You can kind of see the parameter, or the field that they operate in. One of them is a construction zone, one of them is a collection zone. So it also collects items. So if you were to destroy a large building or a large storage section and just had stuff everywhere because it didn't fit in your inventory, these things can start helping clean that up. When you're farming the Dark Fog, they will often drop items. So these will help you collect those items. They also have Dark Fog tiers. So as you can see here, there are multiple different types of things that the Dark Fog can drop depending on the level that they're at, and you can filter which ones you want and which ones you don't if that's what you want to do. Yeah, these things are pretty handy. You can also put some storage on top of them. Big storage, sorry. Once we get access to the bigger storage, you can put those on top to increase its storage capacity. You can also put the logistics bots, the kind of like RoboPorts, on top of them as well. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with these. Before we even get into some of that, let's talk about the mall and the blueprint that we're going to use. So down here by this wind turbine, I'm going to place 2 assembling machines side by side like this. They will get a chest and then a sorter. The chests will, for the most part, be limited to 1 stack. I'm going to preemptively set them to 1 stack. Other chests, there's a couple situations where we either won't have chests at all, or we will only have, we will have extra storage. So this is kind of the template that we're going to use. So we're going to copy all of this, Control C. And this is our blueprint. I'm going to right click the battlefield analysis station because I do not want that in there. And as you can see, this gives us a list of all the different facilities that we will need. Also shows that we have a tech limit of 150. So I've only unlocked the first blueprint. This is the base blueprint, and then you can set up the blueprint icons, the name. So this is the thumbnail name that you will see when you look at it in your blueprints. And then the path. So the path is a little important because if you have a blueprint book, you would place the book first, or whatever pathing there is. So in this case, I have a book called YouTube guide, and then /. And in this case, it would give me new blueprint 001. I already have a 001. You could rename this to something else. I kind of like to have them in the order that I created them for the most part, so I would probably leave this as 001 since it's my first blueprint, and just kind of continue on with the trend. Yeah, so then we would save that. I have already made one, so that is here, and then we can see the battlefield analysis stations at work. So these red sections usually mean that there's something in the way. In this case, it's water, so we can hit spacebar to force those down. What that'll do is it'll automatically place foundation everywhere that it needs. So we are going to do that across here. And just set up a few like that. So if I open up my concrete, you can kind of see when they force the concrete down. It's kind of hard to tell. But you can kind of see there's a blip here. You can kind of see in the lighter sections that it kind of sporadically places it, which is kind of nice because that means that they're basically only placing exactly what you need. They're not like filling this whole section with concrete, so it's not going to completely waste it for you. I did this entire section here. I think I started with like 420, so let's just say 100. So it used 100 foundation here. And yeah, these bots are just going at it. The battlefield analysis station are doing their job. And we could also always add more, like if you wanted to like go ahead and, you know, place one like this or something, like you can always get things placed a little bit faster anyways. And then we're going to remove these after because we now no longer need them. And let's talk about our mall. So this is not quite the full mall that we're going to have, but I wanted to talk about this first section a little bit, and then we're going to go through and talk about what else we need. So you generally want to start with whatever's the most important for you. For the most part, that's going to be belts and sorters. Down here, we would have assembling machines and smelters. There we go. I'm intentionally skipping this middle section, and you will see why later. And we're just going to go down the line. So it's like, what are the things that we're going to need like now? So in this particular case, I'm going to use the thermal power plants because I'm going to use that as an example. And the wind turbines, I like to kind of pair things together. So next we might do, for instance, the Tesla tower and the wireless power tower, which we have not talked about yet, but it requires the Tesla tower. So we're going to add in a sorter here. What else? Like I said, generally we're going to just go down the line, and there's a couple things that we're going to have and a couple things that we're not. We are going to be working on the dark fog soon, so let's go ahead and get the Gauss turret. And it's okay, so let me go ahead and talk about this first. So this only has 2 items coming in, which means that when we bring this one item in, one is going to be the Tesla towers here, the other one is going to be the insiders up here. We can drag that through over here. However, if you had a situation like the Gauss tower, or the Gauss turret, we have room for 4 items, and one of them is shared in between. So this is the example that I was going to give over here. This one has 4 components, and then the thermal power also has 4 components. So what you would end up wanting to do is whichever, like these two share 3 of the items, you would definitely want whatever item is in the middle to be a shared item. In this case, we're going to use iron plates. So I would bring that through over here, and I would probably also need, maybe not need a power pole, but like whenever I'm setting this up, I do like to have the power displayed because I like to pay attention to these little diamonds, which again, this is the biggest downside of doing it this way, But the biggest advantage is that, as you can see, we didn't have to deal with any of this water at all. Just the foundations that we were placing down here. So then this would be ammo. And this would definitely be a situation where we would increase what we have access to. So we would just allow this to create ammo and just go ham on it. What else? We are going to need... We're going to need a few other things, but I'm not too concerned. We're going to need some matrix slabs. We're going to need some liquid storage. These two here have the same ingredients, so I like to pair those together, and I like to do those near the end. Let's see. I'd never use traffic monitors. They are... You can certainly use them to kind of pay attention to things and set alarms if the flow-through rate is not to your liking. Oh, we did not set up mining. That is definitely up there. So let's pair up mining and splitters. And you kind of get the idea. What else would I add? So these two are going to be next. We would probably do maybe the 2 storage together. You could also have 1 storage be here, and then the next storage that we unlock be the next one next to that, which is probably what we're going to do. So I'll probably just leave it at this with the splitter, and that is that. So I'm not going to take the time to hook them all up yet. Ooh, first flight. We did unlock flight, which is awesome. I first want to talk about this section here. So I'm going to set up a section here that is going to allow for us to kind of upgrade our belts. So whenever I first started playing this game, this was one of the biggest pain points that I had was, okay, so how do I get into the next belt, or how do I make the next sorter? Like, I had a similar kind of system. I had something set up where I had a bit of a mall. I was copying it from someone else, but there was just no way to kind of figure out how to progress and like really get into a good mid-game transition. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. So I've allotted this entire section here completely for future upgrades. So the Mark 1 of the belts and the Mark 1 of the sorters will be required for the next upgrade. That is typical in some factory automation games. You generally need the item that came before to make the item that came after, which I think is a great way of doing it, because what that allows to happen is, like, you either need to have a system like that. That way you're not just like wasting everything for instance, the belts. If we were to just make yellow belts and we would never be able to use them again, then they would be a complete waste. So having them as a component for the next upgrade makes perfect sense. Otherwise, you would need a way to break down the original. So for instance, in Satisfactory, they have a system where you create the buildings with the materials on you. You do not create the buildings in a machine. The only thing that you're collecting and carrying with you are components. So when you delete it, you just get those components back. So you're not losing anything. Or in Factorio and Dyson Sphere Program, you have like a Mark 1 item and you remove it, but that Mark 1 item makes your Mark 2 item. So you're not losing, you're kind of still building. And that's, Dyson Sphere is definitely still like that. So that means that for the Mark II belts, we're going to need a machine here to make the Mark II and a machine here to make the Mark II of these sorters. We are going to get direct inserts from the storage here. We're going to need a couple of Tesla towers, one over here and then one over in a section over here, because this is going to be our motors. This is also one of the rare situations where we're probably going to need to use a Tesla tower out here. We still don't have to place any foundation for it. It will just be, I don't know, let's just do it like that. That way we can pick whichever side we want. The reason why I'm doing that is because the next upgrade, the turbine, electromagnetic turbine, does require the magnetic coils as well as the motors. So we're going to have a situation where we direct feed the motors into here, and then we will have These come down through here, and then we'll be able to supply the electromagnetic turbines here. These are also going to have their own belt because this is our Mark II sorter, which requires the motors. So we are going to have this come in here, whichever, doesn't matter. Let's go in there. And then they can be placed onto this belt here. So we have direct feeding into this one, which is a future item, and then placing onto this belt and wrapping around here. So these will need a storage unit. This one over here will also need a storage unit. And we're very, very quickly going to be upgrading all of these the sorters, so I probably wouldn't add the sorters right away. For the blueprint, if you had this initial blueprint placed and then you try to place whatever blueprint that we're making over the top of it, you would probably also have to manually add in the sorters. I don't really know why. That's just kind of a pain point that we have to deal with. Okay, so this is Mark 1, this would be Mark 2, this is Mark 1 and Mark 2. This is the storage for Mark 2 here and here. So then for the Mark 3, we would just go from the chest into the Mark 3. In the case of the Mark 3 sorters, which is up here, you can see that we also need the electromagnetic turbine. But I say also because both of these need the Mark II belts, and the Mark III sorters need the electromagnetic turbines. So that's what this item here is. So we're just going to take this and drag it all the way across. That will give this access to the EM turbines and this access to the EM turbines. We're actually going to move this. So this is going to go in this way. And I'm intentionally placing these kind of out of the way, and you'll see why later. So, one single building of the what will be the EM turbine is not going to be enough, so we will have a system where we bring in extras. So we're going to have a chest, and we will eventually have logistics bots bring this in. But before we even get to that point, we would also use this for other things. So I will have some coming in, but I want the potential for them to go back out. So this is crafting onto the belt, this is crafting into the machine, and the machine is into the storage, and the storage will eventually be able to supply itself and supply this belt. And we can do a row, that's fine. Same with these, we don't want full stacks. These are already set. The belts, the normal belts, I will have 3 stacks. These I would probably have, I don't know, a few, maybe 5 stacks by this point. Okay, so we've got a lot of this covered. So we said that we do not have the access, the ability to look at it just yet. These require the yellow belts and the EM turbines, which we've covered. And then as for the last belt, we need the Mark II belts, and then we need the blue engines and graphene. So these, we're just going to be bringing in via bots. I do not have enough chests, go me. Or the ability to make them. Awesome. Okay, so we now have chests, yay! So these would come in from this. And now for the output. So we don't have room for a chest. Well, we might have room for a chest for this one, but this is kind of tacky. We're not gonna do that. We're not gonna put it here. We're gonna do something fancy. So we're gonna actually send this back into the chest that the Mark IIs were stored in, and same goes for this over here. And then we would just filter these. So this would be filtered for Mark II belts, and then like a section, maybe 1 or 2 belts for the Mark II belts, and then the rest would be filtered for the Mark III belts. And that is how we would manage this. So I believe that covered all of this. Everything is hooked up and connected. everything is good to go. And I will eventually, I'll make a blueprint out of this too. I've kind of already made one, but I want to change it and upgrade it. That is this here. As you can see, this is all lining up. But yeah, so I will have both of these blueprints available. And I am, like I said, I'm not going to show like too much of connecting these, but for the most part, we will get started here. So we need iron and we need the gears. So I'm just going to take the gears, and there's two different ways you could do this. You could either just drag it through, which is the simplest version, and that gives you this like wavy pattern. So if you had something all the way back here, you're going to be wavy, wavy, wavy all the way over. Or you could make it look a little nicer by clicking and then placing up on the arrow key, and then just before the iron plate belt, click and then drop it back down. So I'm probably going to be doing it this way just to make it look a little bit nicer, but for the most part, you can just drag these from one belt to the next. And then we're going to give these a sorter into the machine and a sorter onto the belt. And like I said, that is going to cause problems in these little diamond sections. You might have to add a power tower, and that's the biggest disadvantage I would say to doing it this way, is this little diamond section here. There's a lot of situations where we have to kind of work around that tiny little area. It is what it is. But yeah, otherwise, this is a crazy awesome system in my opinion. It is very large, but like it takes up a lot of real estate. But that doesn't matter too much because, like I said, you can build it on water. All of it is buildable on water. There's nothing that we have to add except for wherever our mall is going, which makes this incredibly, I guess, it makes it so that we can kind of place it anywhere, right? So anyways, in between this episode and the next, I am going to add a few things. I'm going to do some upgrades, which I mentioned earlier. I'm going to do some damaging upgrades. This one is for our turrets. This one is for our turret, ourself. This one is also for ourself, but yeah, a couple things that I'll add. I don't think there's any technologies that I will add. Let's do the energy matrix. So go ahead and unlock the energy matrix. We can do that one. The chemical plant, we're going to want that one soon too, and we're going to want to add the chemical plant to the bus. So that is good to have. And then the crystal smelting, that is something that we will need in a bit too. But I'm not too concerned with it right now. So that is going to be it for me for this episode. In the next episode, I'm going to briefly just kind of go over some of the mall items. I might even add on to the end. But we are going to be attacking the dark fog, so we're probably going to have to defend another wave, which is okay. And then we are going to attack the dark fog and get them off our planet, which is going to be a little temporary. That's fine. And then we're going to get into red science. So we're going to set up a section for graphite and what is it called? Electrified energetic graphite. There we go. So we're going to set up a section for energetic graphite, and if we have time, we will get into the oil processing. The oil processing might have to have that be its own little video. But yeah, that is kind of working into our red science, and we will do that, let's just say in the next few episodes, next coming episodes. Okay, so that is it for me. I will see you in the next episode, and thanks for watching.